James Whitmore was not just any lawyer, he was the sort who specialized in lost causes. He had a knack for getting clients off the hook, no matter how bleak their chances. This particular case, however, was unlike any he had taken before. He wasn't defending anyone this time, he was looking for something. The missing millions from the mysterious estate of the late, enigmatic billionaire, Henry Callaway. The inheritance was shrouded in rumors. People whispered that Callaway had amassed his wealth through illegal activities, possibly even involving the underworld. It was whispered that a sizable sum, to the tune of $50 million, was unaccounted for in Callaway's public finances. This intrigued James enough to take on the case, especially since he received an anonymous note promising a hefty reward if he found the hidden fortune. It was during his search of Callaway's old mansion that James ran into Ivan Kane, a man with a rough face and a tougher history, a criminal who had spent years in and out of prison for various heists and burglaries. James recognized Ivan from the tabloids and knew instantly he wasn't the kind of person to be ignored. Ivan, it turned out, had received the same mysterious note. Ivan had grown up in the same neighborhood as Callaway, witnessing firsthand how a poor young man could turn into a powerful tycoon, though not without getting his hands dirty. He suspected that the fortune was hidden in something personal to Callaway, and the note he received hinted at a partner to help uncover it. Two men, poles apart, James, a polished lawyer, and Ivan, a hardened criminal, were now begrudging partners on a treasure hunt with $50 million at stake. The note provided only one clue: look where Henry began, and you'll find where he ended. The riddle gnawed at James's sharp legal mind, while Ivan eyed the sprawling mansion with an understanding only someone familiar with breaking in could have. Their partnership was uneasy, but they knew they needed each other. James for his sharp mind and understanding of Callaway's legal maneuvers, Ivan for his ability to find hidden compartments and access places no one else could. For days, they searched the mansion. Ivan's skills found a series of hidden safes, but each one was empty or held just old, worthless documents. James scoured Callaway's journals, looking for financial clues or cryptic notes that would lead them to the money. Tensions began to build. Ivan was restless, and used to plans that didn't yield quick results, while James struggled to remain professional in the presence of a man who lived by different rules. It was on the fifth day in the attic that James stumbled across something peculiar: a dusty, framed black and white photograph of a decrepit, old factory. On the back, in Callaway's own handwriting, was a simple inscription: the place where it all began. James showed it to Ivan, who recognized the location immediately. It was the textile factory where Henry Callaway worked his first job before he mysteriously disappeared and returned years later with wealth and power. They knew they had to go there. The factory was abandoned, a decaying relic at the edge of the city. Rusted beams loomed overhead, and broken windows let in shafts of pale, dying light. Ivan led them through, stepping lightly around broken glass and debris. James trailed behind, uneasy, his leather shoes entirely unsuited to this terrain. Deep in the bowels of the factory, they found it, a room locked with a padlock that looked much newer than the rest of the building. Ivan grinned, his fingers itching for a lock to pick. Within moments, the door swung open to reveal a large metal chest. James's pulse quickened as they both stared at the chest. Ivan moved quickly, wrenching it open to reveal neatly stacked bills, millions of dollars, just as the note had promised. The money was real, more money than either of them had ever seen in one place. Suddenly, Ivan pulled out a gun. James froze, his eyes wide. "I'm sorry, lawyer," Ivan said, his voice almost regretful. "But we both knew how this would end. $50 million is too much for sharing." James had anticipated a double-cross. He had been playing a longer game, one where he understood that men like Ivan didn't share easily. Calmly, he gestured to the corner of the room, where a small red light blinked, a camera, live-streaming everything back to a secure location. Ivan's face fell. "Drop the gun, Ivan. You shoot me, and the police will be here within minutes," James said coolly. "I've already sent enough footage to implicate you." Ivan hesitated, and then with a snarl, he lowered the gun. James breathed a sigh of relief. He wasn't a fighter, but he knew how to win battles on his own terms. Ivan wasn't stupid, he knew that killing James now would make everything much messier. With an uneasy truce established, James made a call. Within half an hour, law enforcement arrived, seizing the cash. As Ivan was led away in cuffs, he glared at James. "You might be clever, lawyer, but you're still a coward," Ivan spat. James watched silently as Ivan was taken away. He didn't need to respond. Ivan's opinion mattered little now. The $50 million would go into escrow while the courts decided who, if anyone, it rightfully belonged to. As for James, he'd earned himself a handsome finder's fee and an even better reputation. Walking away from the factory, James allowed himself a small smile. In the end, the mystery had led to its own kind of justice, not just for Callaway's victims, but for Ivan Kane, and perhaps even for himself. Months passed, and James Whitmore had moved on, or so he thought. The trial of Ivan Kane had resulted in a mixed verdict. With the footage James had provided, Ivan couldn't deny his presence at the factory or his intent to steal the money, but his defense painted a picture of a coerced partnership. Ivan claimed that James had used his status as a lawyer to manipulate him into this situation, setting him up as a scapegoat from the beginning. It was a narrative that gained traction among those eager for drama. The judge ultimately sentenced Ivan to 10 years for attempted theft and illegal possession of a firearm, but there was an understanding beneath the proceedings. Something deeper was going on, and the missing millions were just the tip of the iceberg. James returned to his life, but the case refused to fade into memory. One cold winter morning, he received a letter with no return address. Inside was a simple note. "You missed something in the factory. The real game is only beginning." James's first reaction was skepticism. He had gone over every detail of that factory with law enforcement. They had catalogued every inch of the place, finding the money, documenting its storage, and thoroughly investigating the connection to Callaway. But the letter had an undeniable authenticity. There was something about the precise wording, something that whispered of a secret still hidden. Against his better judgment, curiosity got the better of him. James found himself standing once again at the entrance to the abandoned factory, the cold wind rustling through the shattered windows, the decaying machinery echoing with the whispers of a bygone era. He wasn't alone. A dark figure emerged from the shadows, dressed in worn clothes, his face covered in a beard that hadn't seen a razor in weeks. Ivan Kane had escaped, and somehow, he had made his way back here. "You shouldn't be here," Ivan growled, his eyes narrowed. "And you should be in prison," James countered, keeping his voice steady though his heart pounded. Ivan stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "That letter you got. It wasn't a joke. Callaway left something behind, something bigger than the cash. He knew someone like you would come sniffing around." James didn't flinch, though confusion clouded his thoughts. "What are you talking about? The police went over this place. We found the money." Ivan laughed, but it was humorless, a bitter sound, laden with something like regret. "The money was bait. Callaway was smarter than you think. He wanted to make sure whoever found it kept looking for more." James's instincts as a lawyer told him to turn around and walk away, to report Ivan's presence to the authorities immediately. But something else kept him rooted to the spot, an insatiable need for answers. Ivan saw it too, the gleam of curiosity that James couldn't mask. "Listen," Ivan said, lowering his voice, "I need you, Whitmore. This isn't just about the money anymore. Callaway's got secrets that a lot of powerful people don't want coming to light. They tried to have me silenced in prison, that's why I had to get out. We're talking about offshore accounts, political blackmail, and deals with people far more dangerous than you can imagine." James shook his head, incredulous.
"VHY schuld I believe you?
"You tried to kill me for $50 million. Why the sudden change of heart?" Ivan sighed, the fight seeming to leave him for just a moment. "Because I thought the money was the end of the story. I thought it'd make me free. But it turns out, it was just the beginning of something that could get both of us killed if we don't figure it out. I didn't escape just for the money, I escaped because I want to survive." The wind howled through the factory, a stark reminder of how isolated they were, and James had a realization that left him cold. Ivan was telling the truth. Whoever had set this up had made sure the trail was intriguing enough to keep people following, even to their deaths if necessary. "What do you propose?" James finally asked, his voice laden with caution. Ivan smirked, though there was no joy in it. "We go back to where it all started. Callaway's first deal, his real beginning. You remember the inscription, 'Where Henry Began'? There's more to it than just the factory." James remembered that photograph, the note, and something clicked in his mind. There had been another detail, a logo in the background of that factory, a symbol that hadn't seemed important at the time, but now stood out in his memory. It was an emblem, part of an old shipping company, long defunct. Ivan nodded as if reading James's thoughts.
"The shipping docks.
Callaway used them before he disappeared all those years ago. That's where we'll find what's next." James took a deep breath. This was madness. He was a lawyer, not some treasure hunter. But he also knew that walking away now might mean missing the chance to uncover the truth about Callaway's empire and whatever dangerous game he had started. "All right," James said, his voice steady. "We go together. But if you try anything..." Ivan cut him off, his expression hard. "I won't. Trust me, lawyer, I'm not looking to add more enemies. If we do this, we do it smart, or we both end up dead." It was an uneasy alliance, one forged out of necessity rather than trust. The lawyer and the criminal, two men who had been drawn into Callaway's twisted game. Together, They left the factory, heading toward the docks, each knowing that whatever they found next would change everything they thought they knew about Henry Calloway and the dark forces that still pulled the strings. As they approached the docks, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the water. The air was thick with the stench of salt and decay, and an eerie stillness settled over the abandoned warehouses. James looked at Ivan, and in that moment, he realized that no matter what happened next, there was no turning back. They were in this together now, two men against the shadows of a dead man's secrets, following the twisted trail of a mysterious inheritance that seemed determined to consume everyone it touched. The night at the docks was quiet, the kind of quiet that whispered of dangers hidden in the shadows. James and Ivan moved carefully through the maze of shipping containers, their flashlights casting narrow beams across rusted metal and crumbling concrete. The old shipping company building stood ahead, a derelict monument to Calloway's enigmatic past. Ivan led the way, his movements precise and confident. This was his world, and despite their differences, James found himself trusting the criminal's instincts. They reached an old office door, half buried under a stack of wooden crates. Ivan glanced at James, giving him a curt nod before levering the door open with a crowbar. It groaned in protest, revealing a darkened space beyond. They stepped inside, the air thick with dust. James's flashlight swept across the room, landing on a large metal safe against the far wall. Its presence felt almost theatrical, like an invitation. "This is it," Ivan whispered, his voice a mixture of triumph and dread. "Whatever's in there, that's the real reason we're here." James approached the safe cautiously. It was old but looked sturdy, with a complex lock mechanism that Ivan examined closely. "It's a combination lock. If Calloway put this here, there must be a way to open it without blowing it up," Ivan said, more to himself than to James. James thought for a moment, then remembered the old photograph. He pulled it from his pocket, examining it under the flashlight. There were numbers written faintly in the corner, something he hadn't noticed before, July 15, 34. "Try these," James said, showing the numbers to Ivan. The criminal raised an eyebrow but knelt in front of the safe, turning the dial with practiced ease. One click. Then another. The third turn, and the safe door swung open with a soft hiss. Inside, they found something far more significant than money, a stack of ledgers, papers, and old worn books. James's breath caught in his throat as he realized what he was looking at. It was Calloway's blackmail archive, detailed accounts of secret deals, hidden alliances, and financial transactions linking some of the most powerful people in the country. Ivan rifled through the documents, his face a mix of fascination and fear. This is everything. He had dirt on everyone, Ivan muttered, his voice almost reverent. Politicians, CEOs, even law enforcement. James scanned the ledgers, his lawyer's mind instantly recognizing the significance of what they had found. This was leverage, enough to bring down empires or build new ones. Calloway had created a network of power that extended far beyond his own wealth, a system that ensured his control even after his death. "This is why people wanted you dead," James said quietly. "They knew you might find this." Ivan looked at James, the realization dawning between them. The 50 million was nothing compared to the power these documents represented. They were holding something dangerous, something that people would kill for. Suddenly, they heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate. James and Ivan exchanged a quick glance before extinguishing their flashlights, plunging the room into darkness. Someone else was here. James's pulse pounded in his ears as the door creaked open, and shadows moved against the faint light from the docks. Figures entered, 3 men, their silhouettes unmistakably armed. They were searching, and they knew exactly what they were looking for. Ivan leaned close to James, whispering barely above a breath. "We can't let them have this. If they get these documents, we're as good as dead." James nodded, his mind racing. There was only one option. He quietly removed his phone from his pocket, snapping pictures of as many pages as he could, while Ivan scanned the room, looking for a way out. The men drew closer, their flashlights cutting through the dark. Ivan spotted a small, broken window in the corner, barely large enough for a person to squeeze through. He gestured to James, who nodded, tucking the ledgers under his arm as they inched toward the window. Suddenly, one of the men turned, his flashlight sweeping across the room and landing on them. "Hey!
They're here!" he shouted.
Ivan moved like lightning, shoving James toward the window. "Go! Now!" he yelled, drawing a knife from his belt as he turned to face their pursuers. James hesitated for a split second, looking back at Ivan. The man's eyes met his, and in that moment, there was an unspoken understanding. Ivan was buying him time, sacrificing himself to make sure that at least one of them got out alive. James scrambled through the window, the glass cutting his hands as he pulled himself out. He landed hard on the ground outside, the shouts of the men echoing from within the building. Without looking back, James ran, clutching the ledgers to his chest. He ran past the containers, his breath coming in ragged gasps, until he reached his car. He threw himself inside, starting the engine and speeding away, the docks disappearing in his rearview mirror. His hands were shaking, blood dripping from the cuts on his palms, but he couldn't stop.
Not now.
Not when he had the key to everything. Hours later, safe in a secluded motel room miles away, James sat on the edge of the bed, the ledgers spread out before him. Ivan's fate was unknown, but James knew the man had given him a chance to bring the truth to light, to use Calloway's legacy for something other than power and corruption. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he knew by heart, an old friend, a journalist he trusted. When the voice on the other end answered, James took a deep breath. "I have a story," he said, his voice steady. "And you're going to want to hear this." As he hung up, James looked at the ledgers one more time. The weight of what he held settled over him. Knowledge that could shatter the foundations of the powerful, secrets that had cost lives. He thought of Ivan, of the man who had been both his enemy and his ally, and hoped that the sacrifice hadn't been in vain. James knew this was just the beginning. The storm was coming, and he was at the center of it. But this time, he wasn't afraid. He had the truth on his side, and he was ready to see it through to the end.